Hi everyone, Erev Tov, good evening. My name is Caroline. I'm the plastics campaign lead here at Greenpeace Israel, and I'll be hosting the webinar tonight in English. So hopefully you've been tuning into our webinars. It's part of our plastic campaign here at Greenpeace Israel called Echad Pami Ze Lo Tevi. So in Hebrew, that means single-use plastics are unnatural. So as part of this campaign, we're calling to the Ministry of Environmental Protection to follow the European directive to ban single-use plastics. It's about time in Israel. So with these webinars, we're just trying to bring awareness to the plastic situation, and we're hosting a lot of fascinating speakers. So hopefully you've been tuning in. So 2 weeks ago, we had Professor Nadav Davidovich from Ben-Gurion University who talked about microplastics and the impact of plastics in health, which was really interesting. Then last week, actually, we had Israeli award-winning photographer Roy Galitz, who talked about his adventures, taking pictures of wildlife, finding plastic in nature, and really interesting, he found plastic up in the Arctic. He showed crazy pictures that was really interesting. And this week, I'm so excited that we have plastics campaigner from Greenpeace Africa with us. Should be a really fascinating topic, conversation. So we'll be talking about plastics, plastic recycling, talking about the false solution of plastic, why recycling isn't really the way forward. And he's going to give us some insight on Kenya and what's been happening with the Kenya and USA deal. So that'll be really interesting. And then towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to tell what's going to happen next week again, who we're having as a speaker then. Great. So to kind of begin, I'd like to go back to basics, kind of explain again, maybe 1 or 2 minutes, what is recycling? And, I want to go back to the history of recycling because not many know us what is recycling and going back to the history. And then I'm going to introduce our campaigner, Amos, and then we'll get into our conversation. If anyone has any questions, then please feel free to write it in the comments. We'll be checking, and we'd love to answer the questions you have. Okay, so what is recycling? I'm pretty sure everyone knows what recycling is, but recycling is sorting out and converting the waste into new goods again. So of course, paper can be recycled, glass can be recycled, but only some plastics can be recycled. And the more you recycle plastic, the less of a quality it becomes. So it degrades each time you recycle plastic. So it's not good. Some facts which are really interesting and you need to know kind of for this webinar. So over 90% of the plastic that's been produced up until today, so starting around the 1950s, 90% of that plastic has not been recycled up until now. So that means, again, 90% of the plastic has not been recycled. So the research shows that since the 1950s, only about 9% of the plastic that's been produced, all of it since the 1950s, has been recycled. So that's only 9% that's been recycled. And when you're thirsty, you're just going to the store, buying that bottle of water. That actually takes 450 years to degrade. And that's going to break down into microplastic. It's not going to go away. So now I just want to touch upon the history of recycling before we start talking to Amos, because it's not something people really know about. So starting in the 1990s, the public saw increase in messages and advertising for recycling plastic. There was advertisements that you should recycle plastic, it's good for the environment. But so who funded these advertisements? Well, it was the oil and plastic industry. So these are your dirty culprits, Chevron and Exxon, who funded these advertisements saying plastic should be recycled. Plastic, buy more plastic, recycle the plastic. But, they were very aware that the plastic will not be recycled and that it will go into the landfill or will be burnt. And they also knew that financially recycling is not viable. It makes more sense just to make new plastic with new virgin oil. So around 1989, there was a really quiet hush-hush campaign in the USA that saw the plastic industry lobbying for, you know, the green international recycling triangle symbol. So they made it mandatory to be the symbol on all of plastic products. So then everyone would have the perception that all plastics could be recycled. But this was not true. This green recycling symbol was merely a marketing tool for them. And, you know, it created unrealistic expectations how much plastic can actually be recycled. So before this webinar, I was doing my research, and I really want to share this quote I found because it's so striking. So I'd like to read that out. So less than 10% of plastics ever produced has been recycled. So this is what I mentioned. That means 90% of the time, the chasing arrows recycling symbol is misleading, if not completely deceitful. If a product is not recyclable, it should not have any markings on it that it should be recyclable, right? So the plastic industry has capitalized on public confusion. We're all confused about this, you know, green triangular sign with a number in the middle. It has capitalized on the confusion. So everyone thinks that all plastics are recyclable. But in doing so, they have jeopardized the reputation of the entire recycling system. So we cannot recycle our way out of this plastic crisis. It's important that we reduce our single-use plastic waste. So we're not saying that we shouldn't be recycling. In the opposite, we should be reducing our plastic footprint. We are saying that plastic recycling is not the way forward. It is ultimately a false solution to this plastic crisis. So plastic packaging is the problem and not recycling. So, and with that, I'd like to introduce our guest this week. So we have Amos from Greenpeace Africa, really exciting. So he's tuning in from Kenya. So thank you so much, Amos, for joining us tonight. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then we'll get into some conversation. I've got some questions prepared. And then if anyone has any questions, please feel free to comment below. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. My name is Amos Wemanya, a campaigner with Greenpeace Africa, focusing mainly on phasing out single-use plastic. And it is my pleasure to be here.
Great, thank you so much. So I'll kind of start with the first question and address false solution. Maybe not everyone understands what we mean with a false solution. So I'd like to ask you, what is a false solution? And if you could explain why exactly plastic is a false solution.
Yeah, I must begin by saying that the world's plastic crisis is only getting worse. Today, projections have it that we will be having 24 to 34 million tons of plastic waste entering into the world's rivers, lakes, and oceans. The plastics that we throw in our mixed recycling bins to be collected and incorrectly assume that they will be remade anew are causing problems. Like Caroline said in the introduction, that we have only managed, on average, to recycle less than 10% of the world's plastic that has been ever produced. The reality is what we are engaged in is waste recycling. Recycling is a false solution. Also, we need to remember that when the plastics break down, even those that are recycled, they just get back into the environment, and when they break down, they disintegrate into smaller pieces of plastics called microplastics. Where does these microplastics end up? They end up in our environment, in our water. Studies have indicated that very many water products like salt to have contain plastic materials. The fish feed on these plastics, and very many water animals. What does that mean to our health? Plastics are a problem. Recycling is not a solution. we need to rethink.
Yeah, exactly. I cannot agree with you more. I really like what you're saying, that recycling is wish recycling. We wish to recycle our way out of this crisis, but we're not. And you addressed the topic of microplastics. And, you know, in Israel, this is a topic as well, because research has been done and it's showing that microplastics has been found in the Mediterranean Sea, and it's found in marine filter feeders. And even research has shown that, you know, doing a cleanup of the beach, 90% of the waste found on beaches is plastic. So there is plastic in Israel as well. So this is very relevant to us as well. So I'd also like to ask you, you know, what should corporations be doing for this plastic waste crisis? Is there anything we can address to them?
Yeah, corporations need to examine business models that are centered on disposal. What they need to do is they need to move beyond pledges of improved recycling and commit to phasing out single-use plastics. That is given. If we are told going to manage the crisis that we're already in, they need to do that. Also, they need to invest in research and development. This is meant to develop alternative delivery systems, systems that are centered on reusing and refilling. But finally, they need to be transparent, because it is very difficult to hold them accountable if they are not transparent on the plastic footprint that they produce every year. So it is important that corporations commit to phasing out single-use plastics. They need to invest in alternative delivery systems. They need to be transparent to be able to be accountable.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Really interesting that you mentioned, you know, that we have to switch to a reuse and refill mindset. Actually, on one of the webinars, we have planned Refill Aviv. So they're quite a new startup who have initiated this process in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, who focus on refilling detergents, soaps, and everything. So the mindset is slowly coming, but I couldn't agree with you more that it's really the supermarkets and the corporations that need to switch to a reuse mindset. That is absolutely correct. So the next thing I'd like to address, you know, there's many people nowadays who, you know, they want to recycle, they understand the environmental problems. So what we're seeing more nowadays is, you know, green products, or this bottle is made out of 50% plastic, or this is biodegradable, this is compostable, this is bioplastic. There's lots of green marketing tools. So is there anything you can say regarding that? Can we trust the corporations that they're actually doing what they're saying, or is it actually all being shipped to the global south and perhaps, you know, even to Kenya?
Yeah, what we need to do is, first, we need to be aware of the make, use, and dump model. It is unsustainable. We are not going to thrive with such a model. So in as much as it is good for us to segregate the waste, put the recyclables in the recycling bins, we need also to understand that this waste that we assume that is being recycled ends up in other people's backyards. So we have a responsibility here. One is to move away from the throwaway culture, the model that I'm calling make, use, and dump model. Once we move away from that, we need to start holding corporations accountable to the plastics that they produce, because we have a lot of campaigns advocating for recycling. Mm-hmm. But what I've called, we are engaging in wish recycling. We are not really recycling. What happens is this waste gets out of our households, our environment, our communities, but it ends up in somebody else's environment, somebody else's community, and it is causing a lot of problems. We all know plastic causes a lot of challenges. If it's not killing animals, it is destroying livelihoods. Now, our health is at stake. So we need to be more responsible. We need to hold those responsible to account.
Yeah, I could not agree more. We really have to, demand transparency from the corporations. So really, when we try to recycle and do our best, we really need to focus on the recycling companies and see if they're actually recycling, because we don't want all of our plastic recycled waste to be shipped to Africa or different countries as well. And so I mentioned earlier, the green products and, being compostable and bioplastic. Do you think, are these other solutions or are they false solutions as well?
As long as they are used once and thrown into the environment, then we are not finding a solution, because what do? They still pollute. So we need to embrace those alternatives that are real solutions, not alternative solutions that are guised into thriving businesses and for profit when they are not real solutions. So we might impress them, but let's remember, are they used once? Are they single use? Are they reusable? If not, we are still creating the same problem that we're already in.
Exactly. So really what you're trying to say is that we need to move from a single-use throwaway culture to a mindset of, reuse, refillable. So really we encourage everybody to take their reusable water bottle, reusable cup, reusable bag, because this is the mindset we need to move forward to, because that's so important. Now, I want to mention that, China closed its borders to importing plastic waste around 2018. And now that the borders are closed, there's still all of this plastic waste being produced. Do you have any idea of where it goes, or does it stay within our country, or can we trust that our recycling systems are taking care of the waste correctly, or, it's all going to different countries?
Yeah, correct. China used to take most of the waste for recycling, but 2018 it stopped, and many other Asian countries have followed suit. Why did they stop? Because they realized that they were not recycling as much as they would. And they also realized that the plastics that they were importing were causing problems in their backyards. And that's why they decided that they are not going to be importing plastic waste anymore. So this plastic, wherever it used to come from, whether it's in Europe or the United States of America, now is trying to find a new home. And since most countries in Asia have decided that they will not be importing plastic waste for recycling within their territories, then there is only one new home that is remaining, and that's Africa. So I think very many companies, very many countries are now looking at exporting their waste to Africa, which is very wrong. And we have a responsibility as communities, as people, as consumers, to ask our authorities, to ask corporations to be accountable, because we can't just be assuming that everything that we put in our recycling bins ends up being recycled when it ends up causing problem in someone else's environment or community. People have lost livelihoods because of plastic materials. The fishermen and many, many, many communities have lost livelihoods. So we need to be considerate of the plastics that we use. Let's embrace alternative systems, and alternative systems are reusable and refilling systems.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve, a reuse mindset. We cannot emphasize that enough. It's not, don't buy single-use plastics, because it's just going to end up in the ocean and, destroying the environment. So really, it's a reuse mindset. And it's really great that you're talking to us about Africa and Kenya in specific. So I want you for you to tell us a little bit more about Kenya. What's been going on in Kenya at the moment, especially regarding plastic waste? I just want to read out this quote that Greenpeace Africa has produced. So in 2019, the United States exported more than 1 billion pounds of plastic waste to 96 countries, including Kenya. So many Americans believe that they are recycling their plastic waste in their country, but this plastic often ends up as waste in developing countries. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening in Kenya right now?
Yeah, I think Kenya and many other African countries have been very progressive in terms of coming up with measures to curb the challenges presented by plastic pollution. In 2017, the government of Kenya imposed a ban on the manufacture and use of single-use plastic carrier bags. And this year, there is another ban that was put forward by the president, barring the use of all single-use plastic materials in protected areas. And let us also remember that 34 out of 54 countries in Africa have put in place legislations that bar use of single-use plastic bags. So the situation here in Africa is that the authorities have begun to realize the magnitude of the crisis that we are faced with, the plastic pollution crisis. And they are putting in place measures to curb this problem. It will be very, very bad for African countries to go back on these commitments, on this progress that they have made to start importing plastic from elsewhere when they have banned the use and manufacture of certain plastic, single-use plastic materials within their territories.
Wow, that's incredible. So let me just try to understand. So the countries, they want to export their plastic waste to Kenya, even though Kenya has a single-use plastic ban, and then they would use Kenya as their dumping ground. Is that correct?
Yeah, going back to the US-Kenya trade deal, there was an advisory from the American Chemistry Council advising the United States trade representative to include text in the negotiations that would expand plastic industry's footprint on the African continent. And I think that will derail Kenya's plastic-free future ambitions. And not just that, but the progress that so many African countries have already made in the struggle to fight the plastic pollution problem.
That's incredible. So is there anything that Greenpeace Africa is doing right now, especially for this plastic waste? Are you campaigning for this?
Even before that, Caroline, I would like to say that when the American Chemistry Council gave the advisory, they clearly stated that the US-Kenya trade deal agreement will be an important agreement for future agreements between the United States and other African countries. So I think it is not just an issue of US-Kenya, but it is a continental issue. So when Greenpeace Africa came into contact with this information, they started a petition asking the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization that is actively involved in the negotiations not to allow such text to appear in the agreement, not to allow Kenya to import plastics from US and also act as a getaway for expansion of plastic industry on the continent. And it was overwhelming to get over 20,000 signatures asking the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization not to agree to such a proposition.
Wow, that's incredible. Well done to Greenpeace Africa for doing that campaigning work. And we can only support you by saying it would be absolutely absurd for USA or even other countries to export their plastic waste into countries such as Kenya and then, be Africa as a global dumping site. This is not what is supposed to happen. We're not supposed to recycle in countries and then it be exported and shipped to different countries only to be dumped and the environment gets trashed anyway. This is not the way forward. This is not how we're going to solve the plastic crisis. So you mentioned that Africa is a really, progressive country, especially in terms of, legislation and plastic legislation. You mentioned that it's been 3 years since Kenya instituted a ban on single-use plastic carrier bags. We in Israel, we can follow that, we can applaud that. It's so great that so many African countries are doing so much against plastic. Where do you see the future heading for Africa? Do you see a positive outcome, or do you see any challenges?
The power lies with the Kenyan authorities at the moment in the case of the US-Kenya trade deal. And the people have spoken through the petition, and they have spoken so loudly. So I hope the Ministry of Trade and Industrialization is listening, because the people have voiced their concerns. And you will also realize that since the ban came into place about 3 years ago, the quality of the environment has improved. We no longer see plastic bags flying all over on trees. We used to have plastic bags of different colors everywhere, flying in the water, in the air, in our soil, and everywhere. But that has since changed. So the people have seen the impact that the ban has had on reducing the problem, and they are not ready for that. And I hope the authorities are also very keen to listen and hear the voice of the people. But also, they have been progressive. I don't foresee why they would go back on so much progress that has already been made.
That's amazing. Well done to Kenya and other African countries who are such pioneers and have this vision for a plastic-free future. So we can only support that and follow that. And hopefully, as you mentioned, there's positive environmental outcomes from a single-use plastic ban. So this should be implemented in Israel as well. It should be implemented globally, if I'm honest, because we're all on this world. We're all suffering from plastic pollution. It's in our oceans. So it's only going to benefit the environment. So we can really only, applaud African countries for being such innovators in a plastic legislation, and we hope to follow suit really quickly. So thank you for sharing all of that regarding Kenya and USA deal. That was really interesting. So you mentioned the government as well, and the role that the government plays as well. And at the start you mentioned corporations and having corporations accountable. So where does the government have a role in this? What do they say, and how much pressure should we put on them?
Say that again. The pressure the government needs to put on corporation? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly. What's the role the government is playing in all of this?
Yeah, like I've said, and I'm glad that you mentioned that other countries need to follow suit, because the plastic problem that we have is a global problem. And I think government has played a big role. And many governments in Africa, like I've said, 34 of them have come up with legislation regulating the use and manufacture of especially single-use plastic materials. But I think they can do more. They need to invest in research and development to be able to come up with alternative solutions, to be able to support existing solutions. The governments have a responsibility to promote those solutions that are being provided by various businesses, by various entrepreneurs, to replace the problematic single-use plastic materials. So the government has done a good job, but still there is a lot of job to be done in terms of investing in research and promoting existing solutions.
Yeah, exactly. So really, we can only support the government even more. I want to mention again, the throwaway culture, and yes, it is the government as well. But, it's also in the hands of the consumers. So, what products we choose to buy, how we choose to, act regarding recycling and the waste we have. So it is the government's as well, but it is in our hands as well. And you mentioned something quickly, that plastic is a global problem at the moment. So what else is a global problem at the moment, I'm sorry to say, but is the global health pandemic at the moment. So I just want to hear your opinion on, the health pandemic, the plastic waste that's being produced. Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I think since we were hit, the world was hit by COVID-19 pandemic, I think we have seen resurgence of use of single-use materials, especially plastics. And I think the plastic industry has capitalized on this situation to push the agenda of using single-use PPEs. But if I'm correct, research has shown that over 100 medical experts came forward and showed that, confirmed that reusables are good to be used. Reusable PPEs are good to be used during this period. They are safe as long as the hygienic practices are followed. So let's embrace reusables, even at this time when we have a crisis. Unless we do that, then we are likely to cause another crisis within a crisis, another pandemic within a pandemic. So, and experts, medical experts have confirmed that reusables are safe. So let's embrace reusable masks, reusable PPEs, even as we fight this global challenge.
Yeah, that's very true. And let's hope that we don't get into another plastic pandemic. So it might be happening sooner than we know it. I think we just have to be more aware. And I just want to bring it back to, so we mentioned the corporations, we mentioned the government. I just want to bring it back to, us, the consumers, the individuals. What can we do at the moment? Is there one to blame? Can we blame the government? Can we blame the corporations? Do we blame ourselves? What are your thoughts on this? How can we work together, or who can we point fingers at? What's your take on that?
Yeah, my take would be that we are all of us in this together. We have a challenge that we are faced with, the plastic pollution challenge. And we all of us should strive to find solutions and not blame games. So no one to blame, but we all of us have responsibilities. For the consumers, I've talked about the throwaway culture. Let's move away from the throwaway culture and let's embrace a culture where we are able to reuse everything that we have. Let's embrace refilling systems. But most importantly, let's create a community where we can organize, we can educate each other, and by then we are able to liberate ourselves. There are so many initiatives that have been started by consumers here in Kenya, young people, women groups, to find solutions to this challenge that we are faced with. Young groups of boys and girls, women and men, are developing solutions. They are coming together to clean up their own environment. They are coming together to explore what could be. But most importantly, we also have a responsibility of holding corporations and our governments accountable. And that's a very big responsibility, holding the governments and corporations accountable to make sure that the solutions that they are providing for this problem that you are faced with are real solutions and not false solutions.
Wow, that's an incredible answer. Thank you so much for that. So just to recap what you said, so basically, it's back to the throwaway culture. We need to move away from single-use plastics and head towards a mindset of refilling and reuse. And I can only emphasize that in this webinar, we'll also be talking with Refill Aviv on the 2nd of December. It's a new startup in Israel who are really trying to change the mindset of a refill system. So please tune into that. And you also mentioned, more education. That's really important to bring awareness to everyone. Keep the conversation going. Why is plastic, so harmful? Why is recycling bad? And you also mentioned, research and development. And I don't think you need to spend tons of money into that. Like you said, it can also be the local people that have initiatives and they want to clean up certain parts, or, you know, they provide the solutions as well. But really, I think to sum up what you said, we need to hold corporations accountable. We need to hold governments accountable as well. We need to demand from the government that we want change. And just back onto that again, do you have any ideas of what we can do, particularly in Israel now? How can we move forward? So we as Greenpeace Israel, we're we're asking for, you know, a single-use plastic ban. We're asking the Ministry of Environment, you know, to follow the European directive, to follow other countries such as, you know, African countries, European countries. It's about time. Do you have any suggestions what else we can do, or what can individuals do? You know, bring your reusable cup, bring your reusable water bottle. Do you have any other thoughts or opinions on that?
I like the fact that you have started a petition asking the Israeli government to follow the EU directive to ban single-use plastic materials. I think as citizens, you can only continue asking your government and holding them accountable, demanding that they adhere to this. And the more people that sign the petition, the more vocal it becomes. And bans have been instituted elsewhere. Like I've said, here in Africa, we have 34 countries that have already legislated laws that ban use of single-use plastic bags. And it has worked. For example, here in Kenya, and I will also quote an example of a country like Rwanda, the bans have worked to improve the quality of the environment. You realize that since we have had the ban, we have had reduction in the amount of pollution, plastic pollution. So it has worked here. I think the Israeli government need to borrow from that and listen to the voices of the Israeli citizens and follow the EU directive. And I would also like to add that we don't have time to waste. This needs to be done urgently if we at all have a chance of trying to arrest this situation that we are already in. So I would recommend that maybe the EU, the Israeli government can institute this ban as early as tomorrow, if only it can listen to the voices of the Israeli people.
Exactly. I think that's exactly what you mentioned. The sooner the better, really, because we don't want a plastic pandemic to happen. We already have one pandemic. You know, we need to be careful about where our plastic crisis is heading. And we just need to be more mindful of everything we do and how we can solve it. So we're heading towards the end of the webinar, and I just want to open it for questions to anybody. If you have any questions, you can write us below. And we'll kind of, you know, I'll say some key messages, you can say some key messages. And perhaps if we have any discussions from the audience, we can bring that up. But basically, I just want to recap again what you said, which is really important. And, you know, we cannot emphasize it enough. You know, you mentioned moving away from throwaway culture and going to a mindset of reuse and refill. We can only stress that. And we have to hold corporations accountable. We have to hold governments accountable. We need to demand the transparency. Where is the plastic that we recycle in our countries going? Is it staying in the countries that we recycle them in, or is it actually being shipped to, you know, different countries? I can't stress enough, you know, the quote I mentioned. In 2019, the United States exported more than 1 billion pounds of plastic waste to 96 countries. So that means the plastic waste isn't staying in the countries, it's being exported out. So we just need to be really mindful of what is happening when we recycle. Again, we're not saying recycling is bad. The problem is we need to reduce our single-use plastic consumption. That's really where it lies. And you also mentioned, you know, the education that's important. Let's keep the conversation going. You mentioned the research and the development that needs to happen. Keep investing in people and time and money and more information to solve the plastic waste crisis. And, you know, we can't stress enough, but, awareness, awareness, awareness. So the key message from my side, or the take-home message that I have from you, is the only viable solution to fight this plastic crisis is to reduce our plastic footprint. And, we can't recycle our way out of the plastic crisis. You can't, buy a water bottle, a plastic water bottle, drink the water, and then throw it out, pretend you're recycling it. It's going to stay in our environment. So I have to bring it back to the quote that only 9% of plastic waste that's ever been produced, so that's since the 1950s, only 9% of that has been recycled. So like you said, it's wishful thinking, it's wish recycling if we think we're recycling our way out of the plastic crisis. So that's kind of my take-home message, what I understood from what you shared with us today. Do you have any thoughts before there's any questions or anything you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I would like to say eliminating plastic use will create a really change of securing a future that is healthy for our families, for our communities, and for our planet. Corporations need to reimagine models where disposable plastics are eliminated. And for sure, we can't recycle ourselves out of the plastic problem.
Exactly. I think that's pretty much it. So we're kind of towards the end of our webinar now. Let's see if there's any questions coming in. We'll give it maybe a couple of minutes. But really, I think the last thing that I want to say is, what can we as individual consumers do? It starts with, us. We can't point our fingers towards the governments or the corporations. It's about yourselves as well. So the first action, if you want to fight the plastic waste, is with yourself. So let's see if there's any questions. Amos, if you have anything to say while I check the questions.
Yeah, I would just like to urge the audience to go onto the petition, sign the petition asking the Israel government to institute a ban on single-use plastic materials.
Of course, and we'll link the petition also below. If you think, banning single-use plastics in Israel is something we need as well, we can only follow from Kenya what they've been doing. So it's really positive step. Then please sign the petition. So the first question we have, this is from Maya. So does the recycling process release greenhouse gases? So Amos, I don't know if you want to take that question. I'll pass it over to you. Oh, he's not there anymore. Okay. So does the recycling process release greenhouse gases? Well, the recycling process in essence wouldn't release greenhouse gases, but there's a lot of plastic that gets incinerated or burnt as well. So they don't just recycle everything. They also put a lot of plastic waste in landfill and, they burn it. So the burning of the plastic waste, that causes, greenhouse gases, that it causes a lot of toxic smoke, it releases lots of, bad fumes and toxins. There's lots of research and even a lot of documentaries that's been showing, that burning plastic waste is bad. And there's even a term for burning plastic waste, which is called chemical recycling. So in essence, they call it recycling, but it's not recycling. So the chemical recycling, the burning of the plastic waste, yes, that would release greenhouse gases. So Amos, do you have any a response to, do you think the recycling process release greenhouse gases?
Yeah, I think you've responded quite comprehensively. But just to add also is that you find that much recycling is not happening because it is cheaper to produce virgin plastics compared to recycled plastics. So what the plastic industry is doing is using the plastic recycling narrative to gain our buy-in. But the truth of the matter is that they are not recycling as much as they are telling us. So what they're doing is they are continuing to use fossil fuels to produce new plastics. And you realize that I asked them to be more transparent because their plastic footprint keeps increasing every year, even as they promise us to recycle.
I know exactly. You mentioned it as well. So let me see. There's another question just coming in as well. So Unilever is running an advert on reducing their plastic footprints. What's Greenpeace's take on that? Would you like to start that question?
Yeah, I think what most corporations have been doing is they have been pledging to improve their recycling. And my ask is that they need to move away beyond. They need to move beyond pledges on improving recycling. They need to start talking about alternative systems. They need to start talking about investing in research and finding solutions. They need to start talking about refilling and reusing systems, and not just reducing plastic footprint without concrete measures that they are going to use to reduce the footprint. Because if it is recycling, I think that's a false solution.
Exactly. I can only agree to that. And it's a lot of companies, they talk the talk. They like to, make green advertising, green messaging. But as long as they don't, walk the walk, if we're seeing results, if they're actually, reducing their plastic footprint, if they're intentionally trying to remove their single-use packaging, that's when we can see some progress. But I can only agree with you that, a reuse mindset and reuse systems have to be implemented. And this is where Unilever, they need to, get creative, invest in research and development. And, things are happening. So once we see that things are happening, then we can commend them. Then we can see what's going well. And, bringing it back to Israel as well, for example, there's a plastic bottle at the moment from May Eden, who claimed that, I forget how much percent plastic, I think maybe 50% plastic of the bottle is recycled. So again, we can kind of call that greenwashing. What's happening with this plastic bottle? Is it being recycled? Where is it going? Like, who knows? Are they actually recycling the bottle? We don't know this, and we need to demand answers. Where is our plastic going? Is it being recycled? Refill your water bottle. It's not that hard. Do you have any more thoughts regarding that? Do you have anything in Kenya as well?
Yeah, there has been a lot of greenwashing narratives and messaging and campaigns running around, but the corporations know that that is not the situation. They know that they are not recycling as much as they are claiming. We have had various corporations put infrastructures in some places, but they know that even waste segregation here in Kenya has been a problem. So for them to claim that recycling will work here, it's hogwash. I think they need to face the situation, they need to face the reality and stop greenwashing. They need to be wake up to the reality that communities are suffering. We are losing our environment. Families are having health problems because of their profiteering adventures. So they need to put people before their profits.
Exactly. People before their profits. That's exactly right what you said it. And, just going back to the plastic bottles in Israel again. So it's 25% of a plastic, the recycled bottle is made from 25% recycled plastic. And Neviot, they claim to do their plastic bottles out of 50% recycled plastic. So I just want to, make the Israeli audience aware, think about the plastic bottle. Where is it going afterwards? Is it actually being recycled? You can only recycle plastic once or twice before it degrades in quality. So it's great if a company says, oh, look, we're green, but it's just another method of, trying to buy the plastic bottle and, the water you're buying along with it. Water is free. You're buying the plastic bottle. So all I'm trying to say is that, just be mindful of what you buy in plastic, single-use plastic packaging. Recycling is not the answer. And to kind of sum everything up, and, we've said this so many times, move away from the throwaway culture. Don't use your single-use cutlery, your single-use plates, your single-use cups. There are alternatives, It's not that hard. So really move away from that mindset. We need to move to a reuse and refill mindset now, sooner rather than later. So I think we also have one more question before we're going to wrap this up. Let's make this the last question. So would you mind explaining how a plastic brand audit works? Is it effectively working to hold polluters accountable? Amos, I pass to you.
Yeah, over the years, Greenpeace Africa has been conducting brand audits with the help of our volunteers. And a big thank you to the Greenpeace Africa volunteers. They have really done a great job. What normally happens is that we conduct a cleanup and then get to establish those brands that can be identified and do the counting to know who are the main polluters of a certain place. For example, a beach area at a sea. So we have done this for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, this year, because of COVID-19, we didn't. And we found the likes of Pepsi, Coca-Cola, Nestle, Unilever being among the leading plastic polluters. And what has been happening is that the volunteers and the public has been using those findings to hold these corporations accountable. Another thing I would like to touch on is that as we complete this webinar is that the African governments have done a great job, but to them, I would wish they extend the ban just from bags to all other single-use plastic materials, because all of them are problematic. The straws, the water bottles. I'm glad that the president of Kenya offered a decree on the use of single-use plastic materials in protected areas. But how I wish that this also extended to the whole country, that we have banned the use of all single-use plastic materials, with the exemption of people with special needs. But we need to ban and phase out all single-use plastic materials. And a reminder, sign the petition and reduce your plastic footprint.
Great. I think you finished it off pretty well. So if you agree kind of what we've been saying, follow Greenpeace Africa, see what they're doing with the plastic waste in Kenya at the moment in their campaign they're working on at the moment. And, we're in Greenpeace Israel. We're trying to get a single-use plastic ban. We heard from Greenpeace Africa, that it's effective that there's a single-use plastic ban, for the people and for the environment. If you want to support that, then please do sign up our petition. You can find it on the Facebook page and also the Greenpeace page. So I hope you really enjoyed the webinar. Maybe it brought some awareness to you. I'd really like to thank you, Amos, from Greenpeace Africa for tuning in from Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been great, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, so next week, we'll have our webinar in Hebrew again. So next week, we have a really interesting participant. We have Miki Khaimovich. So she is from the government, and she'll be, talking about plastic waste and actions that need to happen from the government. So we talked about the government in this webinar and the role that the government have. And it's really all about the government and the decisions they take. So if you have any political questions, please save them and ask us next week. It's a really crucial webinar that we're going to be holding, and it can only, lead to more progress. So I hope you really enjoyed this webinar. tune in for next week. Hope you enjoyed everything. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and see you all next week. Thank you and good night.